we're supposed to not be at war with Russia, right? It's not our
Right,
war.
right.
So why are we acting like we're at war if we're not at war? Oh, because we are at war. Because that's really what it is. They're just not
And
willing to
it's
say it.
absolutely and blowing up their pipelines. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea that the U.S. can create a terrorist bombing against other countries' infrastructures that we're technically not at war with. Think about the precedent that sets. I mean, that precedent is, okay, now any country has the right to just blow up infrastructure and pretend it wasn't them who did it. It's just completely horrific. And the path it has set humanity on is unbelievable.
Yeah. And now aren't we talking about confiscating Russian assets or something? That's what's in the news right now. I think they're saying that they're wanting to confiscate reserves. I'm just kind of I glossed over it, but it
I
would
don't know
be
what happened.
terrible.
I don't know what happened recently, but I know that just at the beginning of it, so a year and a half ago, they basically confiscated billions in Russian assets from that were in Britain or the Bank of England or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a really bad idea. That is what causes the world to lose confidence in the United States, the dollar, the system, and then want to find new alternatives. That's why they're flocking to BRICS. That's why
Yeah,
if we say, well, at any minute we could just steal your money, or at any minute
yeah,
we just because we morally don't agree with you anymore. I mean, we Americans don't even want them to do that to us on an individual level. I mean, we're worried about that if we go to a
yeah.
CBDC, for example, that they're going to say, well, you know what, Lee? We're not just going to shadow ban you. We're gonna take it a step further, and we're not going to allow you to have access to money because of the things you're saying. That is frightening, and we're doing that to nations. Our country's doing that to nations, and then somehow we're supposed to retain some goodwill. Somehow we're supposed to retain some. Oh, they trust us to bank with us. They trust us to do business with us. I mean, that makes us like mobsters, untrustworthy completely. It's
Yeah,
really a
and
bad idea.
I think you're getting to the heart of the whole proxy war and the splitting of the global economies. It really is based on the U.S. economics and the petrodollar and the fact that our dollar would not have power if it weren't for the fact that still to this day, most oil is bought and sold in U.S. dollars, making it the
Yeah.
global reserve currency as well. And that is why we, want to separate Russia. Our goal with Ukraine, part of it was to separate Russia and China. That aspect didn't work. We did succeed in separating Russia from Europe and turning most of Europe back into kind of vassal states of the United States. But it really does all come down to the economics of the situation. The U.S. dollar is fading. The U.S. empire's powers are fading. And, rather than looking at it diplomatically, how do we create a more sustainable, peaceful world in which we can all get along, and in this post-scarcity world where everybody could be fed and clothed and housed, and it really wouldn't be a problem. We instead are going at it as, let's obliterate anyone who's in the way of our continued hegemony.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely right. We're well, and really, and something that you just said about Europe and them kind of cutting off Russia. I just wonder how long that's even going to last. I feel like Europe at some point is going to start looking after Europe again and saying we just can't continue down
Yeah.
this path of doing whatever the United States wants and joining in on this. And we're starting to see the European people even rise up and say we don't want this anymore. I mean, even at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, there were a lot of Europeans and a lot of Americans marching in the street on behalf of Ukraine. We saw that happen in droves, mass people out there. But Europe was quick to flip. If you notice, the people there, much faster than Americans, the people there were like, well, wait a minute. Why are we continuing to fund this? And our gas prices are sky high. It really hit them very hard.
Mhm.
Why are we doing this? Why do we, what's the point of this? And they started to flip and question the endless funding to Ukraine much faster than the United States has. But it still has been pretty quick in the grand scale of wars. It's been pretty fast for Americans, for American people even to flip, and the politicians in particular to then say, we're not going to continue this. A year and a half is all it took before they started to say, never mind. Normally it's like years and years and years. And then they say, how long are we going to do this for? This is an endless war. But I mean, this was just a quick pivot really because of Israel, right? Then suddenly Israel comes along and they're thinking, oh crap, we can't fund both of these wars. So what are we going to
Well,
do?
even before even before October 7th, before Israel's actions, there's been a rift in the Beltway class. You know, even Kissinger, when he was alive, was out there waddling around saying that we need to end the war, the proxy war in Ukraine. And that rift is because some of them realized that whatever it was that the U.S. wanted to get from a proxy war in Ukraine, some of it the U.S. government has gotten, such as blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, and the things that
Right.
that the U.S. government hasn't gotten from it, you're not going to get. Like, Russia's not going to collapse tomorrow. They're not their partnership with China is not going to end tomorrow. So it's like, how long are you going to do this thing? And it proves that the U.S. was just using Ukraine. You know, now that we've gotten some of what we wanted and didn't get some of what we wanted, we're done. You know, like we've killed 100,000, or, you know, facilitated the killing of 100,000 Ukrainians, or whatever the number is, and millions of refugees. And now, you know, we're done with that cannon fodder largely.
Yeah.
And that's how they plan these things. It's like, it's that cold.
I think you're right in that I think we did get what we wanted. I think that the U.S. knows they knew that there was no possible way they were going to collapse Russia or get rid of Putin. It just wasn't going to happen. That's a real pipe dream. But speaking of pipe, no pun intended. I do think that they really wanted to stop that pipeline. And war was a good way to,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. War was a great excuse for blowing that thing up. And that is ultimately what they got. And so I think once that was done, it was like, okay, well, now Europe is not going to be as dependent on Russia for their natural gas anymore because they can't get it. And so that cut off, because I think that was the big fear, the biggest fear, I think, from an American warmonger perspective, was that Russia would grow in closer to Europe and because Russia had been wanting for a long time, and the Russian people in Moscow have been wanting to be viewed as a European city. Moscow very much looks like a European city. It's beautiful. Yep. You'd want to go travel there, tour around there, right? So they've been wanting, and they're Christians just like the rest of Europe. I mean, it doesn't actually make sense why they're not considered. I mean, they're technically in Europe, but why they're not really considered a European city, part of kind of the European tour of cities when you tour around.
But just economically, like, it's so much cheaper for Europe to get grain and oil from Russia than to ship it from the United States. It's just crazy to do that. But the United States, you know, very much did not want that to happen.
Right. So I think that there was a real fear of Europe kind of cozying up to Russia and being more reliant, being friendlier to them, because it would make more sense if you're going to have a giant, powerful nation. You know, if you look at the world and you say, okay, it's the United States, China, and Russia are the big three. Well, Europe, it makes more sense that they'd be friendlier with Russia because Russia's just right there. And that the United, and this is, you know, and so what? Let them. Personally, I have no idea why we're not focusing on our own territory of the world. We got a lot of countries here, a lot of people here, all of South America, Latin America, Central America. And what are we doing with them? We're not building those countries up. We're not making them true partners of ours to where they can have prosperity. We instead partner with Europe all the way across an Atlantic Ocean when we've got people right here. And if we built up those countries, that would solve the border crisis, right? I mean, they keep talking about that. Well, easy way to do that, start building up those countries in South America and Latin America and make them as prosperous as European nations. But, you know, here we are focused on Europe.
And I think it's because we want to extract from Latin America. The U.S. government is made up of sociopaths who are not interested in helping the people of Latin America, you know, growing their societies. They're interested in just owning Latin America, the Monroe Doctrine, acting like it's ours to extract however we see fit. And that is how the U.S. has behaved for generations.
It's so unfortunate. Those countries are filled with, I mean, they're beautiful. They've got rich history. The people are wonderful. The food is delicious. Like, why? That is where many of us would travel. We'd want to go and be around so much more if it were like Europe, right?
Kim, you'd love, speaking of that, you'd love this. The propaganda done by the New York Times and other outlets, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, showed this, that whenever they show like Venezuela or Nicaragua, one of the countries that the Americans are supposed to just hate, they often put a filter on the photograph that makes it dim or darkish so that the photos don't look awesome. Because, like, you take an average photo of like Venezuela or Nicaragua and it looks gorgeous and
Yeah.
colorful. And it's like, that looks like a place I'd like to visit. But you
Yeah.
put a dark filter on the photo and now it's just harsh and grim. And
Wow. Well, I would like to see us though building up Latin America. I just love it. I love Mexico. I absolutely love Mexico. But I just, and it's
Mhm.
just right there. Why can't it be a partner like Canada in that same way where we're building it up, making it prosperous as a rich history? Mexico City's gorgeous. Yeah, it's just such a waste. Maybe it is racism. I don't know. I mean, I hate to. I'm not one to ever point at that, but Europeans are white, I suppose, and Latin America's not. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's the entire reason behind it. But they are also, they're
well,
Catholic, they're Christian, they are
well, and
very
you look,
culturally similar to us.
and you look at some of these countries, and there are more indigenous people in some of them, and generally those are the ones like Hugo Chavez and others who are fighting for indigenous people to be treated better and for socialism and nationalizing some of the oil and other resources, which is not what the U.S. wants. And you often can look at the photos of the opposition, the ones that want to bring down Maduro right now, and they're far whiter
Yeah.
because there's a race difference in some of these countries, and the U.S. is generally supporting and financially or via other means the kind of the coup mongers who are a more right wing, whiter portion of the country.